I feel like we have a weight and balance issue again, that some people need to be over here on this side of the room. Please bear with me. It is my great hope that my voice holds out this morning. I started losing my voice on Thursday after I'd taught my 2 morning classes back to back. I'm not blaming them, but I probably did yell at my 8 o'clock class. And then I had, I've done several cemetery tours this week because it's kind of the season for that, and around All Saints and All Souls. And so I had several cemetery tours. Last night I did 2 back-to-back in kind of the damp air, and I think that might have affected my voice some. So hopefully my voice will hold out. If it doesn't, I'm going to do the rest of the talk in interpretive dance. Okay? So yes, this is being recorded, so pray that my voice goes out. Let's hope not. Let's hope not. So I understand last week Deacon did a fine job with the mustard, the parable of the mustard seed. Yes. Huh? You weren't here? Oh. Thank you, Deacon, for doing that. Thank you very much. Well, today we're obviously going to be onto a new topic, the parable of the pearl of great price. And this one is also, obviously, if you're following Matthew 13, you've been following the story here. This one is in Matthew 13, 45, 46. Another very brief but profound a parable, probably, I think, one of my favorites for a lot of reasons. But I wore my pearls in honor of this. I guess you see that, right? I wore them. They're not necessarily pearls of great price, but they did belong to my mother. So they have a long history in my family. So they have meaning, at least. This actually is in a series, that series of parables that we've been reading. And this parable, it is a merchant who makes a discovery, a pearl that we are told is of great price. And then what happens is the merchant, remember that each one of these have a structure, excuse me, there's a setting, there's a character, and then there's the parable, right? So in this setting, it's the merchant who finds the pearl of great price, and he sells everything that he has in order to possess that one pearl. Now, I want you to hold that thought, okay? Because as we begin, I want you to be thinking about something. Think about the nature of what a merchant does. A merchant is engaged in commerce. He's engaged in trade. Actually, his livelihood depends upon him having goods to trade. Yes? Are you following me? But yet we are told right up front that he sells everything that he has to acquire this one thing. So if he's going to continue to be a merchant, what must he do with the pearl? Okay, hold that thought. I was hoping you would say that. That's the great wrong answer I was looking for. So this particular parable has been interpreted in lots of different ways. We've seen that every week throughout Christian history. Everybody who has an opinion has weighed in on this, and we have some very weighted opinions about this, notably the doctors of the church. It continues to resonate. This one does, I think, even in more contemporary, even secular kind of constructs. This is a very popular parable, particularly in the realm of pop psychology. Does anybody ever listen to Jordan Peterson, for instance? Okay, Jordan Peterson has drawn upon this particular parable, a couple of them, but this one particularly. A lot of relationship gurus draw upon this one to talk about that pearl of great price and what you have to do to achieve that, meaning in a relationship. So there's all sorts of ways to, well, I'm telling you, there's lots of ways to look at this. But we're going to do, of course, as we typically do, talk a little bit about it in its historical context. We're going to look at it from Cheryl's view. And then, which, you know, you can go get a cup of coffee with that. And then we're going to look at it from, obviously, from the more weighted interpretations of the church fathers, and then talk about it in some of its contemporary associations or applications. So the parable that was immediately preceded this one, if you were following along in Matthew, remember we only have so many weeks, so we couldn't do all the parables, but the parable that immediately comes before this is the parable of the treasure found in the field that you're probably familiar with. These are often sort of lumped together. The treasure that's found in the field. The preceding verse is this one, actually. It says, the kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field, which a man found and reburied. Then in his joy, he goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. So it sounds very similar, doesn't it? Sounds very similar. There's somebody who finds a treasure, sells all he has, and then he goes and buys the field where the treasure is. Yeah? Except I want you to pay particular attention to how these are constructed. The kingdom of heaven is like treasure, is how that one begins. All right? Y'all with me? Everybody paying attention? Okay. The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field, which a man found and reburied. Okay, that's how Jesus tells that parable. So think about how that connects to the next one he gives us, which starts with the word again. Okay? I think this is really interesting. Maybe. I might have to get Greg to advance my slide back there. Of course he did. I think it's just a matter of pressing the space. There it is. There it is. Y'all just enjoy the breaks between, okay? It begins with the word again. So it's kind of a bridge word. It's interesting, this word. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant searching for fine pearls. When he finds a pearl of great price, he goes and sells all that he has and he buys it. So I'm interested in a couple of things here. First of all, the word again. Again. Jesus seems to be reinforcing the preceding parable, right? Does he not? Again. Or is it, let me tell you this again, just in case you missed it the first time. In case you've missed it all the way up to this point, let me tell this to you again. I suspect it's the latter, you know, because we've already had the disciples go back to him a couple of times to explain things to them. So it's like, again, here we are, in case you missed it. But this time he adds the plot twist, the kicker. And I wonder if anybody's already identified what it is. Remember that the preceding parable, the kingdom of heaven is like what? Treasure. The treasure in the field. This one is, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant. A merchant. So we have the treasure found in a field by a man, but we have the pearl of great price that's found by a merchant. So follow this really closely because I think this is important. And again, this is kind of Cheryl's take, so maybe it's, you know, take it with the appropriate grain of salt. But I've done a lot of thinking on these parables through the years, reflecting on them myself and my personal spirituality. And this one especially, I think there's something quite visible to us if we just stop just for a moment to even look at the way they are constructed. The seemingly concise narrative involves a multitude of things, okay? Multitude of things. The most obvious and common thing you can take away is this, and I dare say if you Googled, what does the pearl of great price mean? What does the parable mean? This is what you're going to get, because I did it. I tried it on several different search engines just to see what would happen to the average searcher who's looking, the average seeker who wants to know what is the most common. I even asked AI, what is the most common interpretation of this parable, and this is what you get. It teaches that the kingdom of heaven is worth the sacrifice of everything in this life. The parable's central idea, this is what AI told me, The parable's central idea is when the benefit is great enough, no price is too high to pay. Okay? Doesn't that sound simple, straightforward, easy enough? Okay. All right. So let's consider these points. The pearl. Again, this is based on what you might find in a Google search. The pearl represents the kingdom of heaven, and the merchant's actions to sell everything to obtain it symbolizes the church. The value of the pearl, let's think about that, the value of the pearl. That's important because in Jesus' time, you have to keep this remember in its historical context, a pearl is rare, it is expensive, it's actually the most valuable jewel. More than rubies, more than sapphires, more than emeralds, pearls are the most valuable jewels. We have, historical records of, for instance, Roman merchants who would dive, to pull oysters out, and had entire employed large groups of men who did nothing but shuck oysters looking for pearls. I mean, that's in the Roman record. And actually, there were military efforts that supported that because it helped finance some of the efforts of the Roman military. So it's a very, very important thing to remember how much the ancient world, the hearer of this, would have known. We're talking about something, the pearl is already valuable. So what do you mean a pearl of great price? They're all of great price, okay? Then there's that element of the sacrifice. The merchant selling all that he has. It's a sacrifice. The pearl dealer's act of selling everything shows that the value the pearl has is more than anything that he has. He will give away everything, sell everything to have this one thing being the kingdom of heaven, right? Everybody with me so far? Okay. The benefit, what is gained? Eternal benefit. It's eternal benefit, obviously. It's nothing that we can experience here on earth. The benefit here is eternal if we're talking about the kingdom of heaven. Okay, so are we done? That's it? Because that's the easy read. That's what the Google's going to tell you. That's what ChatGPT is going to tell you. There it is. Well, you just got the easy reading, okay? Might we think about it another way? Might we think about it another way? Actually, let me go back just a second. I'm not ready to talk about him yet. Because this is another easy read of it. Might we be the treasure? This is an alternative reading. And this is more of a more recent kind of Christian interpretation. I would say even dare say post-Protestant interpretation. That we are the treasure. That Jesus is out to find all those who are lost and gone astray, but he values us so much that he would give away everything to buy his people back. And he does this with his life. Okay? All right, that's another pretty simple read, that we are the pearl of great price. We are so precious to him that he gives it all to have the pearl of great price. Except, you see, that's not what this says. Okay, well, so what if we are the pearl of great price? I guess that's a great way to think about it if you want to. Make that note, and we'll come back to it if you want to. But to me, there's something much more here than that. The parable doesn't say that we're the pearl. It also doesn't say that the kingdom of heaven is the pearl. Does it? You see how my mind works? It says the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant searching. Right. And then he goes on to tell us what the actions of the merchant are, what he does, right? But I think that's super important there. So let's talk about that. As much as I would like to see myself as treasure for Jesus, and I am, and we all are, yeah, I think we're missing something huge if we stop at either that first interpretation or the second one, which is very straightforward. The second one especially omits something that's glaringly important. So as we've done before, I want to kind of unpack this a little bit. Because you know I want to dig in here, right? You know I want to dig in. Let's talk about a merchant. Let's talk about a merchant. A merchant is someone who trades things, who engages in commerce. A merchant is someone, to be fair, in the ancient context, is someone who would have had less than a stellar social standing. To those hearers of this parable, merchants have a very negative connotation. Even in the book of Sirach, it mentions merchants as those who, quote, are only out for their own benefit. A lot of the writers, if you went to even secular sources from the Greco-Roman world of this time period, they disparage merchants. The Epistle of James says merchants are godless and, quote, they boast in arrogance. It's in the Epistle of James. In Revelation, merchants are those who, quote, have grown rich with wealth of wantonness. So, people who lived in this time would have heard again Jesus saying something that might have been a little shocking to them. The kingdom of heaven is like a merchant. So, to put this in some even further context for you, think about this. People of this time period, and actually, I would dare say people of the ancient world, the medieval world, and even into the early modern world, into the age of exploration and discovery, there's this kind of general understanding among people, economic understanding. I'm trying to simplify this, but we call it mercantilism. Y'all ever heard that term? Okay, so there's this understanding that persists into beyond the age of exploration and discovery, into like the 18th and 19th century, when we begin to shift our view economically. There's this understanding that the amount of resources and wealth in the world is fixed. It's finite. And so if I'm going to have more, it's going to have to be at the expense of someone else. That's the prevailing understanding. Like there's a pie. And if I have a bigger piece of the pie than you do, okay, it's because I've taken it. And if I want more of the pie, then I'm going to have to take it from someone else. Does that make sense? So this is kind of the prevailing economic view until the very recent times, when we now understand that that's not true. I mean, the resources and wealth in the world are not fixed. They're not finite. I don't have to take from you to have more, although in reality sometimes that's how it seems. But that's not the way that it is. So another way that historians talk about this, or especially maybe sociologists speak about this, is to talk about a limited good. Okay? There's only a limited amount of stuff that's available for you. It's a limited good. So, since wealth is finite, and these people of this ancient world would have heard this way, they understood it this way, those who seek to acquire more by trading, by engaging in trade, they're viewed very negatively, like you're taking from someone else. Does that make sense? I think that is important context to have for what Jesus is saying, to put yourself in the place of the hearer of this parable, the way they would have understood it. The pie's only so big. If you want more, if you're going to trade for it, then you're hurting someone else. Okay, so why then would Jesus use a merchant in the parable if he knew that his hearers probably despised the idea of a merchant? The kingdom is likened to the actions of a merchant. Well, remember how we reacted to the kingdom being like leaven? That was kind of shocking, wasn't it? It would have been shocking to the ancient world to hear that. And really, as I said, the focus of the parable is the merchant. It's not the pearl, it's the merchant. It is his actions. And maybe not necessarily what he found. It's his actions. Okay, so this is the gotcha moment, right? This is the gotcha moment, the shocker. The kingdom is like the actions of a merchant. So, when he finds this pearl of great price, something so valuable, he will go and sell everything to keep it and never lose it. Now, as is so often in Jesus' parables, the negative becomes what? A positive. The negative is redeemed. It becomes something positive. It's a positive force. The actions become positive. Think about the tares growing alongside the wheat that we talked about. Remember? Think about the leaven that we talked about that would have had a negative connotation to the hearer, but it actually multiplies. It amplifies the good. Later on, we're going to hear about shepherds. Well, nobody likes shepherds either. And then there's a parable Jesus tells about a Samaritan. Okay? So he conjures every negative image to tell these stories. I'm just checking to see if you caught on to a pattern yet. Right? All sorts of lower people still left to talk about. But the merchant, an outsider, perhaps even a traveler who's just looking for profit in this story, becomes an insider. Someone who actually epitomizes the understanding of what it takes to recognize something valuable. Truly valuable, and I'm not talking about material value. Right? It's not about material value. As we've seen, I think you've seen this, has Jesus ever hesitated to use impure or socially unacceptable ideas to drive a point home? Or to use those impure or negative kind of imagery for positive symbols for the kingdom of heaven? Never. Never. And let me talk about why that is again. I'm going to see if y'all remember why. God sees what? Promise and possibility. Always and only. That's all he can see is promise and possibility. Where we see what? Limitations. We make judgments. We make assumptions or presumptions. So that when he opens this parable with the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant, right? Maybe some ears closed to that. But that's the whole point. He sees promise where we stereotype. He sees possibility where we see limits. God knows what can be, and we so often see things for only what they are. Because what you see what happens is that the merchant, upon his discovery of this pearl of great price, is all in. He's all in. All in to the point that he now owns nothing but the pearl. Now, I made this point earlier, but think about what this means. If a merchant owns one thing, what must the merchant decide? He is no longer a merchant. He can't be. Because he now possesses the one thing he will not trade. Okay? I mean, think about it. I mean, if you read the parable and not already have thought this through, it might occur to you, well, okay, he sold everything he had to get the pearl of great price, but now what does he do with it? Is he going to keep it? If he keeps it, he will have nothing else to barter with. He will have nothing to trade. And I think, again, helpful to put ourselves in the context of the ancient hearer. This pearl is already so valuable just because it's a pearl. The merchant is below all people. So you've got these extremes to the hearer. You've got this incredibly valuable jewel, and you have this lowest of the low, at least in terms of public opinion. I don't know, shepherd might come close. We'll talk about that in the next one. But anyway, what an interesting contrast that the merchant sells everything to buy a pearl that now he cannot trade. That's the whole point, I think. If he keeps the pearl, he has to cease being a merchant. So what does that mean for the merchant? His life is changed forever. He's no longer a merchant. He's on a completely different trajectory. There's nothing he could trade this pearl for that would be worth more. So wouldn't you say that that might be an end to his enterprise as a merchant? He's got this penultimate thing, and it's the only thing that he has to trade. So his lowly conduct, his merchant enterprise has to cease, has to stop. He has a change of life. He leaves behind what was, and he is now practicing and part of the kingdom. In short, the merchant has stopped being a merchant, and he has become part of the kingdom of heaven. Jesus has said so much in this very brief parable. But I do want to stress to you, I think that he indeed probably meant this even as a criticism of economic practices that exploit people. That's another way I think you could read this. That would have been so prevalent. These people would have known that. But again, more importantly, the outsider becomes the insider. This outsider now has special knowledge of the kingdom of heaven because he found something so valuable it changed his life to possess it. Unless we forget, this is just like the person who recorded this parable. Who recorded this parable? Matthew. Matthew might know something about this. Matthew ceased to be a tax collector. I mean, literally, if we read it literally, he walked up and left it. He just got up and left and left the station behind, right? So Matthew knows something about this. The merchant ceases to be a merchant. So the kingdom of heaven is like the merchant, like the tax collector, like the sinner, any sinner, who becomes a new creation when they've encountered the thing that has the most value. The truth. Right? There's nothing higher. There's nothing, and that's why I think this idea of the pearl is so important to understand in the ancient hearers' understanding that there is nothing more valuable materially. No jewel. So it becomes a metaphor for that thing, whatever that thing you want, whatever name you want to give it, the truth, Christ himself. It's the thing that has the most value. Okay, so I don't know, how are y'all feeling about that? The kingdom of heaven is like a merchant who is no longer a merchant. Yeah? Or the tax collector who's no longer a tax collector. Okay, so the early church fathers, there we go. Kingdom of heaven like a merchant. So the early church fathers, I'm going to look to them a little bit. I feel like I have to give them some cred here. The first two here, obviously, we've talked about this before. The earliest doctors tended to interpret the parables in the construct of the church. They saw many of these parables to be read only as representing the church and maybe some of the heretical kind of issues they were dealing with in the early church. So it's not very surprising that you're going to hear what you do from the first two. The others are more medieval scholastics who've got a little bit different take. But St. Augustine viewed the pearl as Christ himself and didn't really write much more than that, just that the pearl is Christ. The true treasure is Christ, he says. It lies in the personal relationship with Christ. For Augustine, the merchant symbolizes, somebody said this, the merchant symbolizes a seeker of truth. Okay? Now, St. Jerome similarly understood the pearl to represent Christ, but he really highlighted the necessity for all of us to reject the material goods of the world, okay? To completely reject materialism. And in order to attain spiritual riches, he says you will have to do that. But I want to caution you to understand that you would expect St. Jerome to say that. St. Jerome is someone who moved to live in a cave in Bethlehem, okay? So you might expect that from him, that he would read it that way, that it's a rejection of material goods. Because he believed, of course, and taught that true union with Christ comes from this spiritual wealth that requires relinquishing the material. So he read it that way. But as Christian thought kind of develops then into the High Middle Ages, theologians like St. Thomas Aquinas says the merchant is a symbol for humanity's search for truth. Very simple. He's searching for truth. But he says the pearl is God's grace that saves the seeker. Okay? So we're getting a little closer to maybe a deeper understanding here. And then St. Anselm of Canterbury, another medieval theologian I don't get to talk about very often, but who I really, really enjoy reading very much. I highly recommend him, by the way. St. Anselm of Canterbury. He is 12th century Benedictine, who was the Archbishop of Canterbury. Great thinker. He emphasized more about, really wanted us to look at the transformative nature of the pearl itself. Like, how does a pearl begin? Okay, yeah. So he wrote beautifully about this, about thinking about it, even just from going back to the very like origins of the pearl itself, how it begins, its transformation, how it becomes the thing that is of great value and great price. Because somebody said it starts from a grain of sand. I've heard it put another way, but anyway, it starts as something that is quite simple and elemental, right? And so he writes very beautifully about and draws the parallel between the transformation of the pearl and the transformation of the person who seeks the pearl. That actually, it's kind of a similar story. So, contemporary understandings, I promised I would touch on that just a little bit. Is it behind door number 1? Door number 2? Contemporary understandings. So, as I said, I find it interesting that this particular parable is the one that is often invoked. It's used a lot in just pop psychology, I dare say secular, like self-help teachings, for instance, employ this one regularly. And that's especially true in the 20th and 21st century. It continues, of course, obviously to be a source of inspiration to us as Christians. They're not taking anything away from that. But it has been expanded beyond its traditional theological context, and I feel like I had to at least mention this, because maybe more so than any other parable Jesus taught, this one is used. It's found its way into what we would call the relational vernacular. And when I first thought about this, when I was first really thinking about this, and I'd heard Jordan Peterson speak about it, which I guess is what kind of got my mind going on this, I thought, well, that's really not relevant. But yet it is, because when you're talking about interpersonal things, when you're talking about our relationships with other people, it doesn't have to be a romantic relationship. I mean, I think that's the way Peterson spoke about it. It doesn't have to be that. It's any relationship you have with another person. I think that it might be important, because the pearl symbolizes, in that situation, the depth and the value of someone else, okay? The depth and the value of someone else. It often requires individuals to do what? To maintain a relationship requires sacrifice. It requires going beyond little bit, going beyond. It also requires individuals sometimes to do what? Let go of past behaviors to become a new creation. Yeah? So you can see how this has been mined for that sort of thing. I think that makes sense. A lot of people today use a parallel to the demands of healthy relationships. And when you think about it that way, there is no greater relationship than that we have with God. So if we mirror here among ourselves the relationship we have with God, well then of course the parable of great price applies. The concept of selling everything can be understood as maybe the emotional and psychological investments you have to make in a relationship, in someone else, for another person. I think it encourages us to reflect on what we are willing to do, what we are willing to sacrifice to have that pearl of great price, that relationship. So there's so many parallels. I think it's not hard to see why it's made it into that vernacular. But I hope you notice that the universal truth here, the bottom line would be the same, the universal truth of sacrificial love. And sacrificial love is the kingdom of heaven. All right, I finished in record time. And I don't know if that's because I was worried my voice was going to give out and I felt like I needed to hurry. But at any rate, hopefully you see that the pearl is the motivation. It's transformative for the merchant, isn't it? It's transformative. He's found this thing that is so valuable that he actually will have nothing left to trade. He has to stop being a merchant. He has to leave his life behind to become a new creation. Okay? Valuable, something that must be kept, not squandered or given away, right? So, hopefully you've seen this from the insights of the incredible church fathers to the medieval scholastics to your humble Sunday school teacher to Dr. Phil. Hopefully you've gotten the whole gamut of that now for the pearl of great price. The journey of the merchant is a model for all of us. All right. And my voice made it. But we're finished early, so let's talk about it. So what do y'all think? Thoughts, comments? Anything but criticism. I ain't got time for that this morning.
That could mean also that God takes bad and makes it into good.
Absolutely, absolutely. Just like the pearl starts as a grain of sand. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, David.
Can you say more about why you did, at the beginning you said you're going to come back to why it's not.
Oh, yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for redirecting me back to what I was going to do. I did say put a pin in that. Okay. Because nowhere does he put himself as the pearl, right? The kingdom of heaven is like a merchant searching for fine pearls. So I don't see Jesus as the merchant. Jesus is not searching for pearls. He's not searching for goods. He's not searching for things. I see this more as someone, and obviously when you think about the pearl of great price, I mean, we're talking about, to the hearer, the thing that there could be nothing greater than, right? Materially. So I don't think he's talking about us. Now that's just my read. You may read it completely differently. Other people have, just ask ChatGPT. Other people have. That doesn't resonate with me. The way all of these are constructed, it's like the kingdom of heaven is like, how does yours begin from last week? The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, okay? The kingdom of heaven is like leaven. The kingdom of heaven is like a merchant. So he could have easily said the kingdom of heaven is like a fine pearl, right? And stopped there. But he didn't. And I think that's because he wants us to consider the merchant.
So what is the direction of the interpretation of
Mm-hmm.
So what truly would be,
When Jesus describes the kingdom of heaven, it is that perfection to which we all hope to attain. It's the great mystery, isn't it, that we're all leaning into. And the whole purpose of the parables, we talked about this, remember at the beginning, the whole purpose of him speaking in these parables is to use imagery that people would understand. So they are both simple, but there's always, to me, the more complex. You're pulled in to the mystery. In order to get to the kingdom, you got to dive a little, go a little deeper.
so you would only kind of interpret it to the level to which you would
Yes,
understand, like
yes.
he's talking to his disciples, or he's talking to the crowd, or he's speaking to us.
Speaking to us. So there's so many layers to it. So someone who heard this, let's think about that. That's actually a great thing to consider, because consider the hearer who would have the negative reaction to the merchant might not hear the rest of this, right? Or that person might say, now wait a minute, why would he use a merchant searching for pearls? What might that mean, right? So you might be drawn into an exploration of that, which is going to bring you closer to this idea of the kingdom. One person might hear that the kingdom of heaven is like what happens, what the actions of the merchant are, that he finds this pearl of great price and he sells everything he has and he keeps it, yeah? And so this keeping it, the merchant has the kingdom of heaven. He's not going to let go of it and might not think about it any more than that. Does that make sense? Whichever way you've read this or whichever sort of layer you've peeled back on the onion, the essential truth is the same. I'm just intrigued by the merchant, like I was by the leaven, why Jesus would use that imagery, which is on face value quite negative. Yes, Edna. I'm sorry, can you speak up? Because I'm deaf today too.
Okay, the one who understands the supreme value of the kingdom gives up whatever he
Right. Right?
and that's from the conference of Catholic bishops.
That's right. That's right. And again, that is the most common read. I mean, that's what you're going to encounter, is that's the very common read. And I'm not disagreeing, certainly not with the USCCB. I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying I think there's more we can dive into than that. I think that's the whole reason we're doing this.
I kind of, I always look at things a little strange.
Well, me too, Deacon.
Listen, I don't really see the merchant expecting to do what he does.
Right.
I mean,
He's not, I don't think. I think you're right.
it's like Matthew. Matthew probably didn't go to work that day thinking he was going to shuck everything and leave.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, but, it's kind of like when we find something, and then, we may be looking for pearls, but we're not expecting to find what we find, and then when we find it, it makes everything else fall away, their importance fall away.
Right.
So we kind of go on what you're saying, he couldn't be a merchant anymore, he probably didn't want to be a merchant.
No.
Matthew didn't want to be a tax collector.
No.
I mean,
No.
it's kind of like, so it starts off, like you said, with that negative connotation. But we gotta step back. What happened at the end? We know what happened to Matthew. I mean, so this guy, it's like, wait, my priorities have all been wrong. I want this pearl not because of if we got to get rid of the value of it, not because of the value of the object.
Right.
But what it brings, that contentment, and that satisfaction, and the love, like what we talked about, it brings it to me, and I don't need anything else.
And I think that's the reason that it's often used on our level in interpersonal relationships. It's like when you find that thing, you don't need to look anymore. You stop being that thing you were before, out there looking, right? I think that's one of the reasons it's been directly kind of transferred into that kind of pop psychology. But yeah, I mean, clearly there's a universal truth to this, isn't there? you find something that is so valuable that you're willing to give everything else away to keep it. Okay?
It's like the selling of everything to discover a rightly ordered life is what they finally have discovered when they discover that thing.
Right.
Jesus Christ.
Right. Right. But what was interesting to me is, and you can go back and look at, again, the preceding verse is the parable of the treasure in the field. Because it's worded a little differently. You know, that the kingdom of heaven is like treasure in a field. So it's clear that Jesus is talking about the treasure there. Here he's talking about the actions of the merchant. Does that make sense? It's the merchant. Huh?
I'm sorry, could the field be like the human heart? You know, in the first parable, and the treasure
Sure.
is there, but it
Sure.
just has to be discovered.
You have to discover it. You have to find it. Right, within your own heart, within your own soul. Yeah. Certainly could be.
As a matter of fact, in the book of Revelation, it describes at the end, heaven coming down to us.
Right.
So, they said nobody has ever found heaven, maybe heaven is here on earth.
And Jesus is just trying to teach us what it's like. This is what it's like. Oh, yes, Father, I've been waiting.
Well, I want to proceed this parable just a little bit.
Okay?
If we could imagine, of course it's a story, teaching story, but there's something that comes before.
Mm-hmm.
The merchant is searching. Now, how does he get so interested in his search? He keeps on searching. We're using our imaginations now.
Right, right. This is good.
He doesn't know there's going to be a pearl of great price. He's just searching. He has been inspired to search.
Mm-hmm.
He is a good, thorough merchant. The inspiration for the search comes from God. So, even the search itself is God inspired. He is following
A prompting.
God the best he can.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that search now is leading him to the pearl of great
Mhm.
price. But the search itself is inspired.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Very good. Yes. Great. It's a prompting. He's responding to a prompting. Yeah.
Do we?
Isn't that what, what came to me when you were speaking, Father, was in all of us, there's this hole that we spend our lives trying to fill, and it's in reality our search for God.
You're right. 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 Our hearts are restless
And
until
we
they
use
rest in you.
material things and things of this world at first, you know,
Mhm.
especially in our young years,
Right.
to feel it and then notice the void is still there.
Exactly. This is really good stuff, though, isn't it? Just love this stuff. Anybody else have anything? Yes, David.
I find this interpretation delightful. This is something I have not thought about much, especially the encouraging of the removal of oneself from the material system. I am not convinced that the other interpretation is less valid.
Okay.
So, like, one thing you said at the beginning was, you know, where is God in each of these?
Right.
And so in the previous two where you had people,
Right.
the parable of the sower and the parable of the seed and the tares,
Right.
in both of those, God was the man.
Uh-huh.
Where it's like,
God's the sower. Yeah.
and here's the kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed, and in both of those we get Jesus' interpretation.
Right.
God is the person.
That's a good point.
And so, because of that, I immediately think if you're going to have the kingdom of heaven is like a person,
Okay.
But that being said, I do enjoy the back and forth of it is like God searching for man and man searching for God. Where it's
Right.
like, I've heard people explain the parable of the prodigal son, where it's which of the characters is God.
Right.
And it's like God is the father and God is the son who went out and then came back.
That one's coming up in February, by the way.
Oh, good. Sorry if I.
No, this is great stuff. And I think that this is exactly why these are so, I mean, you borrow your word, delightful, is because they invite us in. If you even stop to consider the meaning of a word, a single word, you can unpack so much. I think you made an important point, though, David, when you said that we have parables that Jesus interpreted, right? He told us what they meant. Remember St. Jerome warned and said, you don't need to be thinking about this because you've already been told what it means? This one was not. This is left to us. And so that to me speaks again about that beautiful kind of freedom that God gives us to explore. There's the fixed and there's the finite. Here's the interpretation and this is what I meant. And here's some words you can go away and think about. I love that. Yes.
Well, adding what Father said and David said, when you look at that first sentence and just cut it off then, and the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant searching for fine pearls. Can we be part of heaven or inside that bubble of heaven just by the prompting and being
Just by searching, just by being a seeker. Yeah. You're approaching it for sure. Yeah. Yes.
It doesn't matter who you are.
I was gonna say that this parable and even the one about the farmer in the field as well sort of always strikes me a little bit incomplete with this because it's over and over again Jesus says it's not enough to hang on to what he gives us and we have to share it.
Yes.
And so when you leave it at this, he sells all he has and he buys the pearl and then he just holds on to it and it feels very, like I said, incomplete, I guess.
Right.
If we're not figuring out a way to then share that.
Well, let's use our imaginations in and consider that because he has the pearl, he can no longer be a merchant.
Right.
So he's not a merchant, but he has this thing of great value. What does he do with it?
First time you read that, I actually said, should we call it his precious?
It's a precious. Because he's not a merchant anymore.
I don't think he buries it again.
No.
I think it's,
Displays it.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's,
Puts it in a museum.
Lets people look at it.
Yeah.
I think what came to me is I think the merchant really needs to share his journey.
Well, yeah. Now he has a testimony, doesn't he?
Right. Yeah.
This is what I was and this is what I am. And it's because I found this. Yeah. I'm so glad that y'all are thinking this morning. Yes, Marie.
I've lately been reading a lot of Pope Francis constantly talks lately anyway about encounters.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of looking through the New Testament and thinking, what would I like if I had an encounter? And I keep thinking about that little rich man that walked away.
No.
One of the saddest figures.
Yeah.
All of the
That always makes me sad.
because he did not see the pearl that he said he wanted, but he just wasn't willing, like Oscar Romero, who in the 20th century, gave up his life, changed his life from the love of the people with money,
Right.
and the same mass he was shot
Right.
by the people who were opposed.
Opposed to the church. Right.
That character, the encounter with that man, He walked away sad. He made a decision. He walked away. He got mad.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we all do have, it is all about choice, isn't it? I mean, we have to be creatures of free will to choose God. So, thank you for bringing up Pope Francis, because it's actually a great segue to something I wanted to remind you about. So, did you see the flock note that went out with Pope Francis's new encyclical? Y'all, it's 30,000 words, but I read it. It is an easy read. I mean, typical Pope Francis, he writes in a very accessible kind of way, and I highly encourage every one of you to read it. It is a beautiful statement about love. It's all about the hurting world, the conflict that surrounds us, even our interpersonal and local and national and international conflict, and how the ultimate horizon is still to love. It really is beautiful. So if you've not looked at that, I encourage you to do that. The other couple things I want to make sure I remind you of before we go is this Thursday night, we have this First Thursday's Faith Formation. So this Thursday night, it will be Mr. T.C. Veit, who's the principal at our school, who's going to be doing, I just went blank. Yes, thank you. Lord, teach us to pray. Lord, teach us to pray. The 7 petitions of the Our Father. And that's this Thursday night. And then the first Thursday in December, we're going to have a big parish potluck on that Thursday night. We're going to come together and be talking about the kickoff of the Jubilee year, 2025. I won't be here for the next Jubilee year unless the Pope calls an extraordinary one like he did for the Year of Mercy in 2015. They're normally only every 25 years, so I'm pretty sure I won't be here for the next one. I guess it's possible. Mathematically, it's possible, but mentally, probably not. So, I'm very excited personally about having a Jubilee year. It's a great time for the church to celebrate around the world, and there'll be only 5 holy doors this year. 4 of them at the major basilicas in Rome, and then there's one that Pope Francis is going to open at a prison in Rome. So it's a beautiful time. The theme is Pilgrims of Hope, and very, very excited about that. So come hear more about the Jubilee year. Because we are a cathedral, our bishop must, according to the rubrics of the Bull of Indiction that Pope Francis issued, our bishop must celebrate the opening Mass here at the cathedral on December 29th. And that's going to be at the 5:30 Mass. There's a very special liturgy for that. So already be thinking about that, okay? Got a whole year to celebrate, Jubilee year. All right, guys, thank y'all. I don't think we meet next week. Is that right? Because it's Veterans Day weekend or something?
Not next week, and then the next week is the 17th, the big celebration.
But we do have adult faith on the 17th.
Yes, we will have adult faith.
Okay, because I believe, somebody, look, check their handy dandy schedule and tell me what the topic is on the 17th.
Parable of the drawnet.
That is Father Rainey. So Father Rainey will be doing that one. So y'all be here for that. Okay, thank y'all. Oh, thank you.
You made it, girl. And I found another $20 for you.
I dark the white.
Hold on just a second. How do I? Hold on just a second. I got to get this to stop streaming.
You want me to put it pulled up?
Not just yet.